It's the Cardinals Insider podcast. Always good to be here in our Busch Stadium studios. Joe Pfeiffer, our Director of Alumni Relations. If you're watching on YouTube, Larry State. He's our Manager of Alumni Relations. I'm Brett McMillan. And we were on the mound last month with Al Hrabosky. We stay on the mound this month with another former Cardinal pitcher, St. Louisan Kyle McClellan. Kyle, thanks for sitting down, taking some time. This is a lot of fun. And I got to say, while Al's tough, I wouldn't want to cross him. You look like you could still play. Al is a little past that point in his career.
I say looks are deceiving. It would hurt quite a bit to go out there. Joe, these guys have seen me at fantasy camp. It doesn't come out like it used to, but
yeah, he's in great shape. It hasn't impacted his swing though.
Thank you.
Sarcasm.
That wouldn't be a problem. Wouldn't be a problem anymore. Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about
right,
that.
exactly, Joe.
Well, depends on your manager.
We could still roll out there to the field and serve up probably 10 BP fastballs, and I bet you.
Me and you go at it.
Let's do it.
I'm in.
We're in.
How many do you think you could hit out if we got somebody out there and threw you? I mean, right down center. Out of 10, how many do you think you could hit?
Out of 10?
Yeah.
I don't know. I get a couple out.
I ask Ozzie that sometimes because he still looks, even though he's mid-60s, he looks like he could play too. I mean, the
his
athleticism.
hands. I've seen him do
guy.
some of those clinics he does. His field work, his hand work is still unbelievable.
And he had that shoulder surgery way post-career.
Mm-hmm.
So he can still make that throw from deep short, which is incredible. In your mid-60s, still making that throw from deep short.
Yep.
But you think about the end of his career, a lot of people don't even realize how long he played with that shoulder injury. At that time, it was risky. You didn't know what your recovery was going to be like from that surgery, so he didn't want to take that chance. So you saw him throw on the run a lot more in that part of his career than early. He had a cannon early in his career.
Yeah, he's fun to watch in those corporate clinics and stuff that he does in fantasy camp, the things he puts on. He's got his little stick and routine that he's mastered it.
It's incredible.
But it's still very – I know the current guys love watching it too because there's still so much they can take away from – it's one thing to talk about it. I used to do this. It's another thing to still be able to show them, I used to do this, and here I can still do it. It goes a long way.
What's that like for you? It's neat for all of us when we go to fantasy camp or we come down here and there's, oh my gosh, it's Ozzie Smith or it's Ted Simmons or whatever. You played, so it's a little bit different, but you're a St. Louis guy. Like you were a Cardinal fan long before you were a Cardinal player. Freezer was saying to us for TV at fantasy camp that was his first oh wow moment was playing catch with Ozzie Smith.
Yeah.
What was your first oh wow moment as a player?
It was definitely my first minor league camp. So it was 2003, and I went down early and rented a hotel just because it was like my first spring. I wanted to kind of get acclimated, and so I went down there and I just walk over. And, I'm like, I'm here. I don't know where to go. Well, in spring training, like the major league and minor league locker room are in the same building, different. There's a very distinct hallway that as you learn, you don't cross a T in that hallway very often, if ever. And you come in a back door. You don't come in the front door. There's a lot of different, things that come with being in big league camp. And so I'm in there and I don't know this yet. And so I just walk in the weight room and I walk in there and there's like Jim Edmonds, Scott Rowland, Tino Martinez, all on a treadmill running, and I look around, it's all these guys, and I'm like, holy cow, and I haven't had that exposure to. I guess that was probably my first personal interaction with a big leaguer, really at that point, and so it was just like, oh my gosh, and they're just walking around everybody, and and they're kind of looking at me, and nobody kicked me out, so I just kind of hung out a little bit, I totally shouldn't have been in there, but. And I remember going home and calling my parents and be like, I saw this person in the weight room and I rode the elevator with this person. I did this and this person said hi to me. And then you start to, as you get more around it, it becomes more normalized. And in 2000, after that 2003 season, Pop Warner, who's the third base coach now, was my manager. And he reached out to me and said, hey, there's some guys here in St. Louis that all work out at Maryville University in the off season, and you're welcome to come over and take part of that. And so I went over there, and it was Ryan Howard, who just won MVP, minor league player of the year, John Mabry, Albert Pujols, Mike Matheny, Kerry Robinson, Bennis would pop in every once in a while. Cal Eldred would pop in every once in a while. It was anybody that was in town would go there and throw. And so I would go play catch with them, and then I'd just watch them hit. And I'd sit around, I'd sit behind them and just kind of sit there and take it in and watch. And then you got to know the guys a little bit, and then you'd see them in camp, and I thought I was super cool because they'd be like, hey, Kyle, they'd point me out, and in front of all my minor league friends, I felt good about it. But then you start to become a little bit normalized, and then you walk into that big league clubhouse for the first time, and I was a 40-man invite, not on the team, but I remember thinking to myself, like, you have to assume you belong here. Don't get starstruck. Don't get caught up in it. Like, you belong here with these guys. As weird as it is, try to act like and put on this face and this perception of, like, I'm here because I deserve to be here in the same locker room with these guys. And that's not an easy thing to do. You kind of got to put an act on for sure.
You can tell. I mean, you can see the guys that are roster invites that are part of the 40-man. Even now, the guys that are trying to get in that mindset of, okay, I'm here because I'm trying to make this ball club, and the guys that are still going, oh my gosh, it's player X and player Y, and it's natural, but I'm sure it is difficult.
It's a fine line too of you got to play your role and know your spot, but also soak up as much as you can, take it all in, because you don't know how long you're going to be there, and then the part of, like, I'm trying to give off this vibe that, like, I'm comfortable here in terms of, like, I know I can play here. I know I can be in this locker room, and so it's a tricky, man. Those rookies, they got a tough line to walk, and I think that line was a little more drawn in the sand probably 10, 15, 20 years ago than it is now. I see some of these things now that guys are doing and getting away with, and that would have never been the case 15, 20 years ago when Carp was there, especially. But it's a little different right now in the game and in the clubhouse. But there's still that fine line and that respect. I think that's more than anything is coming in there with a respectful attitude.
We're not that far removed from opening day. What was your first opening day like here at Busch?
Well, it was a rainout. It was 2008. It was Waino started it and got rained out a couple innings into it. But we got to go through all the ceremony and do everything, and then played maybe 2 innings and then got rained out and came back the next day. So officially, I made my debut on opening day, even though it was a day later than all the festivities and that. But, for me, I'll never forget driving in that day. I called a couple different people in the organization that had an impact on my career, that believed in me, that stood up for me. I know for a fact that my name was on the chopping block 2 or 3 different times, 2 or 3 different years. And there's individuals that stood up for me and said, hey, I think we need to give him another chance. And so, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for those people that took that chance on me and took my name off that whiteboard that they had all the names on and would cover up so nobody would see it, and they'd pull it off for the coaches meetings. And so I made a few phone calls that day on the way in and just wanted to let those people know, like, I'm driving down to Busch Stadium for opening day, and I just want to thank you for what you've done in my career and believing in me and allowing me to get to here. Because if you look back at my career, you would be shocked that I made it to the big leagues if you looked at my minor league stats. And so it wasn't by pure performance. It was by, people saw something in me, and it took me a while to get to that point to where I could actually do what they thought I could do. And it took people believing in me for a while. So I think more than anything, like, that day was just man, I made it. Dr. Paletta, who did 2 surgeries on me to allow me to continue to play. I saw him after I came in when I had my appearance that day, and I walk in the training room, and he's in there, and he's like, I'm kind of, still glassed over trying to figure out what happened. I kind of walk in, I had a good outing, and I kind of like floating on air, and he's like, you're not going to say anything? I was like, thanks, Doc. I appreciate it. Thanks for saving me a couple times. But just so many people that go into, and that's what you think about. My parents were there. All my friends and family were there. The sacrifice my parents made to, cart me around all these games and paying for lessons and paying for gear and equipment and giving up their weekends and, so that I could play. And, family that supported you, friends that supported you, coaches along the way. Like, it's just anytime I see a kid make his major league debut, I always think about the army of people that are celebrating that as well, because it's such a cool thing for everybody involved. And, and then to ride in that car, my dad had season tickets. So I've been, he'd take me out of school. We'd come down to a bunch of opening days as a fan, and then to be in that car on the receiving end. And the St. Louis fans they got it. They knew the story, St. Louis kid. And so, so many people shouting at you and yelling at you and faces you recognized while you're going around there was was pretty special. And then all the Hall of Famers, you know, to get to shake their hand as a not an equal, obviously, but as like somebody that wore the same uniform is totally different than any other experience of meeting them as a minor league kid. You know, there's just I feel like there's a different respect when, hey, you're on the field here opening day. You know, this is a big day. Anytime you make a roster, opening day is great, but here in St. Louis, it's extremely special.
Well, in 2008, Larry was actually with our Cardinals magazine on the publication side, so he had a special.
And you know, a lot of what you just said, I was saying this to Joe the other day. I can't even really repeat it without choking up. Talking to your dad shortly after that, and he kind of said just what you did. I mean, when you're going around the morning trip, do you know where they're sitting? Were you looking to make eye contact
I had no
them?
idea. I didn't. The family section, I didn't know where that was yet.
But if you talk to him later, because I remember your dad talking about you came out of that gate, and the first thing he thought of was all those people who coached you, all the sacrifices, everybody, and your dad said, and he just lost it. That moment when you came out.
Yeah, and that's, you know, to be able to experience here in St. Louis. I mean, you know, if I played for the Seattle Mariners and got to make my major league debut at home in Seattle, it still would have been great. But here, it just, I mean, you know, you couldn't ask for anything more than to have that experience, and then them get to be here and then have that such a deep connection to the organization, the you know, the city, the stadium, everything that goes into it. It was definitely, and then to be able to pitch that, you know, have my major league debut be on opening day. Matt Holliday was my first hitter. I almost hit him in the head, got a standing ovation, but we can get to that later.
Does he remember that?
When we traded for him, we went in the video room and because then I threw a real good slider and then I got him out, and so I made a point that, you know, you were my first hitter and I got you out. He's like, I remember that. You almost hit me, and then a nasty cutter away, and then.
So you're suggesting it was better for Matt's career that he came over to the Cardinals?
Oh yeah,
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I had his number.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah, would have kept his numbers tamped down.
You mentioned that that Waino was the starter that day, assuming he threw to Yadi, and it's so crazy because here we are, however many years later, and Yadi and Waino are still going out there as the battery. I mean, you have a really unique perspective as a fan, you know, in 04, 05, when those guys were breaking in, you were still paying attention to the Cardinals, even though you were kind of at that point where you were in the system. Now you get to watch them as a fan on the backside. You shared a clubhouse with them. I feel like we all have talked ad nauseum about how great these guys are, and they deserve it, but just give me your 2 cents on that, of what you've seen from the inside that we need to appreciate this final year with them together.
Well, I think it's worth talking about because you won't see it again. You know, like watching Tom Brady play football, you know, I often remind myself, like, watch the game. You know, like, even if you're going to turn it off, watch it, because we're currently watching history that any minute now is going to be taken away. There's very few players I think you can say that about, but this duo here is one of those. You know, anytime they pitch together, soak it up, enjoy it, because they're going to be gone soon, and there's going to be a massive void in the organization, in that clubhouse, and on that field from a fan standpoint that you just can't replace that. And so for me, Adam's one of the most influential people probably in my life. Personal, baseball, everything. Like, just one of my really, really good friends that has really challenged me in a lot of great ways, and I think helped mold and shape me quite a bit. And Yadi, I mean, I feel like a lot of his accolades and awards, especially defensively, I was a big part of. You know, like, I helped him get all those Gold Gloves.
A lot of breaking balls in the dirt.
Right. Yeah. A lot of runners I got on base to allow him to throw out.
Right.
You know, but Yadi was a guy that, for me, coming up, I tell people all the time, I don't think any other situation I would have been in, I would have came up. In my minor league career, I spent most of my time in A-ball and rehab, physical rehab, and then went AA for 2 months, skipped AAA, and made the major league roster. I don't think any other situation I would have been in that I could have come in and never been sent back down to the minor leagues and stayed 5 consecutive years here in St. Louis if it wasn't for Yadi. Yadi took all of the thinking out for me. So now, not that it wasn't hard, because he would force me and challenge me to do things that maybe I wasn't quite ready to do, but I had to figure out how to do it real quick, because he was going to challenge it, and he was going to make me throw first pitch curveballs that wasn't my strength. He was going to make me throw, you know, fastballs and counts that I didn't really want to, or spots of the plate that wasn't really my strength. And he expected me to be able to do that. And for me as a young player, I'm going, if I want to stay here, I got to figure out how to do that, you know? But I didn't have to go out there and think about what's the best way from. He studied me, he knew my stuff, he knew the hitters, he knew the situations, and he knew exactly what pitches to call in what situation. And for me, that allowed me to have a successful career because I didn't have to try to do all the other stuff with it. All I had to do was execute what he wanted me to do. Not that that's easy, but it took a huge load off of my plate of trying to do all these other things. Now, I watch film. You know, I had to get on the same page as him, and there was a few learning lessons that went with that. Gary Sheffield, this is probably one that sticks out the most. We're in Detroit, and I was down that day, so I pitched a bunch, and I was going through a rough patch. It was my rookie year, and I hadn't had a full season in a while, and so I was just kind of like, there's just a lot of things going on, and so Tony's like, you're down today. Well, we end up like the 16th inning, so the phone rings, and Mac, you got the 17th, or whatever it was. And so I come in, Miguel Cabrera, I contributed to his 3,000 hits. I gave up a double.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and then Sheffield comes up, and I fall behind 3-0, and Yadi calls a fastball in, and I shake. And he calls a fastball in, and I'm like, oh, gosh. Like, all I can think about is Gary Sheffield, like his bat wiggle.
Quick
like, he's
hands.
going to hit
That's
this.
some quick
He's going to hit this thing 7,000 feet, and I'm going to walk off. And so I throw a fastball in, strike, takes it. It's next pitch, fastball in. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. And so I throw it, and he takes it. Strike two. And so next pitch, fastball in. And I'm like, no. And he puts it down again. I'm like, no. And he kind of like slumps down, calls slider away, and I throw it, and he hits a double off the wall, and we lose the game. And so I go in the tunnel, and I'm like, I think I'm getting sent down because I've had a rough stretch. I just shook off Yadi. I just lost the game. Like, there's nothing worse. I can't express to you enough. There's nothing worse than losing a game as a reliever. Like, to walk off and to feel. I always took that so hard. That night it was miserable. The next day I was miserable. When I walked into the field, and I know it wasn't the case, but I felt like everybody was looking at me when I walked in the locker room, and they're like, there's the guy that blew it last night. I was miserable. I was miserable during batting practice. I tried to, cover it up and be a good teammate. And I carried that until the first pitch of the next game. That was the only time I could allow it to go away because I was like, okay, now I have a chance to come back and do something again today. But it is the most miserable 21 hours that you can ever experience. And so I'm in the tunnel. I'm mad. These guys just fought 17 innings or whatever it was, and here I come in for 4 minutes and blow the game and just waste everybody's efforts, And so I go up, and Russ Springer grabs me. He says, come here. He said, let's go to the video room. And he walks me through, and I didn't at the time realize that he was willing. He was sitting on one pitch. He was sitting on one location. He knew I liked my cutter. He knew I was going to throw it away. And he was willing to strike out on 3 straight fastballs inside to wait for that pitch away. And he took the entire at-bat to wait for that one pitch, runner on second, nobody out. If he struck out, there were still 2 more guys. I was so far from seeing that. And so Russ walked me through that, who had 16, 17 years of experience. And so I'm like, okay, I learned a valuable lesson there. So a couple weeks later, we're in Pittsburgh. I shake him. We lose another game. And Yadi comes in, he throws his glove in the locker, and he says, never again. You will never shake me again. And I said, I agree with that. I'm totally fine with that. So what I learned at that point is, look, I'm in every time I'm pitching in a game. It's a big moment my rookie year. Like, I was pitching those 7-8 innings, 7th, 8th innings in tight games, and so one mistake, one not being on the right page with Yadi, could cost us the game. And so at that point, I would call timeout. Anytime I wasn't sure, I call timeout. He'd come out, I go in, and he'd say, "What are you thinking?" And if I explained myself and what I was thinking, 9 out of 10 times he'd say, let's go with that. But he wanted to see, and I had to earn his not respect, but like earn his trust that I knew what I was doing. I had a plan for what I was doing, and then he would allow me to do it. But we got to the point where we didn't even need signs. Like, we just knew. Like, I would just randomly be like, I want to throw something totally opposite, and Yadi would like throw it down. I'm like, that is so weird. I was thinking, hey, let's take a shot here. But he reads the hitter so well. He studies, he preps, and he knows me. Like, he knew what would make me successful. Totally different than Jason Mott. He treated Jason Mott totally different and called totally different game for him because we had totally different, pitches and ability to do things. And so that's what is unique about it. There's I won't give a name, but another catcher that I came in contact with throughout the through baseball. And I told him, I said, hey, this is typically what I do. You know, if I throw a cutter in, the only way I'm going to get beat is if a lefty pulls it right down the line. So if I throw a cutter in, can you move the first baseman? You know, like Yadi would always move the first baseman for me. And he goes, you better talk to the bench coach. I don't do all that. And I was like, oh, okay. Like Yadi would stand on his head if he told him to. Like if it helped you do something, he would do it. There's not a lot of guys in the game that would do that. And so I really, really appreciated Yadi and his just the effort he puts into it day in and day out. In the 6th inning of a 14-2 game against the last place team, he's treating it like Game 7 of the World Series, and that's all I can ask for, you know, as a teammate.
It's amazing. You hear your teammates talk about him, and the guys on the roster now talk about him, and it's those intangibles.
Yeah.
You know, he's 2,000 plus hits.
Mm-hmm.
What, 9?
Which, when he first came in, nobody would ever
guess that.
That would happen.
The massive number of gold and platinum gloves.
Yep.
But it's those intangibles.
Yep.
That put him over the top.
Yeah.
And that's going to be interesting.
Yep.
5 years from now, when the national sports writers look at him, they don't look at those intangibles. And you know, that concerns me at some level. I mean, he'll be fine in the end, but it's just those intangibles when we're just looking at numbers.
I think when you get to the Hall of Fame, and it frustrates me, but the voting, like he's the most dominant player at his position in 2 decades.
Yeah.
Then I mean, you can put him out there with anybody. So I mean, why don't we? Let's just put him in. I mean, why would we wait and do the whole like the first ballot thing? It just doesn't matter. He's clearly the most dominant player at his position for 2 decades. He deserves to go in. Right.
I think the thing to me is that you won't hear a guy, past or present, that's played with or against him that undersells him. His name comes up, and they give an answer just like you gave that makes the rest of us who never played Major League Baseball go, whoa, mind blown, you know? And I guess some of that could be to be polite, but it just seems so genuine.
So you look at, I mean, Yadi shuts the running game down when the plane lands for the other team, right? I mean, they come in, they're like, well, we're not going to run.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the World Series in 2011. The Rangers ran quite a bit that year. They tried it like once, maybe twice, and he threw him out. You know, so you start to look at how many attempts against him in his prime. There was next to
minimal.
None. I mean, it was like, and if it was a guy that was like trying to, you know, put that feather in his cap, and it was like the guy in the league that, you know, it was a battle, and he just shut those games out. You talk to any other manager, any first base coach or something, and you talk to them about coming in here and wanting to try to steal bases. Like, what was your game plan? And I was a guarantee it was like, we got to go base to base. And Cheo always got mad at me, but it would give me the ability to take a little longer to get to home because I knew people weren't going to steal. So instead of being 1-2, you know, from to the plate, maybe I could stretch that to 1-3 and kind of get a little bit more momentum. And Cheo never liked it, and we talked about it before. Because he wanted me to get rid of it as quick as I could to give Yadi, but Yadi can make up for that, you know. So it helped me, you know, by a tenth of a second to give me a little bit more time to get, you know, ramped up, and I didn't have to rush so much. And I was a slower guy to the plate anyway, so it really helped knowing that they weren't going to run all over me. You know, you have a guy back there that can't throw; it would have been running like crazy on me. So he helped in so many different ways, and I think Cheo. You ask Yadi who the most influential player, coach in his career was, and I would guarantee you it would be Cheo. I mean, him, Albert, and Yadi, those years here, they played a whole different game. The 3 of them played their own game, and then the rest of us were playing in a separate game because Cheo taught Albert and Yadi a ton about how to watch a game. And you sit there and watch a game with those guys, they watch it at a different level. You could be watching the same game, but they're playing they're playing chess, and everybody else is playing checkers for sure.
Yeah, and what was it like with Albert? I mean, it's different because Yadi, you're working with him when you're teaching. But just to see how Albert was going about it every day when he was here.
So, you know, Albert, being a superstar is tough because, like, for me and Mike Matheny talked about this one time. I could walk in and, you know, be joking around and do whatever and kind of lock it in for my little role of being in the bullpen. Albert, when he woke up that day and when he drove to the field, like, he had to have a different presence about him because of all the stuff he had to deal with all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't go get milk at the grocery store without getting 17 people wanting to talk to him.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
The gas tank was a chore.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, so everywhere he went, and that's what people don't realize. Like, over time, you just kind of like retreat, and you just kind of just want to do your own thing. And so Albert was pretty quiet for the most part. You know, he'd come in, he'd do his thing. There was days where he was excited and you'd know it. You know, he was feeling good. But, man, like the preparation that he had to go through to be a superstar is unlike anything that I've ever seen. And I would say of anybody I've ever played with, I don't think anybody's on that. Like Yadi's, I would say Yadi's a superstar, but not like, you know, and no disrespect,
you'll talk
obviously,
to your
but
kids. I mean, you'll look back on that era of being his teammate, and you play. I mean, it's Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and him as far as right-handed hitters, right? I mean, think about it. It's
and I'll also mention Yadi and Chris Carpenter and Adam Wainwright. You know, but I feel like that, like Albert had to deal with so much more because he was just, I mean, you know, the face of MLB, you know, for many years, and I think the pressure that went with that, like, you know, he and Tony understood it too. Albert didn't sit on home games. If he got a day off, it was on the road, and I think it was because Tony and Albert both understood that. Like, there's somebody in that stadium that saved up their money and came to one game a year, and they drove who knows how long and got a hotel or did whatever because they wanted to see Albert Pujols, and both of them understood the magnitude of that. And I bet you if you went back and looked at healthy days off in St. Louis, I bet you there's hardly any. Because he wanted to play here. He wanted to play for the fans. He understood I never had to deal with that. You know, like nobody had to deal. But that's what he was going through every day. And so his preparation, man, to be able to mentally handle that and then I was talking to a girl the other day that was hitting some softballs, and she doesn't like to hit off the tee. I said, you know how many balls I've seen Albert Pujols hit off a tee? I've seen him hit 17 million baseballs off a tee because he would just go in there and tee work and hit in the cage for hours before he went on the field to do it.
And, you know, something I will never forget, it was in 2005, the last year of the old stadium. We had won 100 games, won the division, best record in the league. All the nostalgia all year long about final season of Old Busch Stadium. We won the game that last day. You know, we were going to have a couple days off before the postseason began. Couldn't be better. All the former players that came back and were on the field for this huge ceremony down in the tunnel underneath after the game, walking around down there. All the current members of the team were just soaking that all in, from Red Cheney's to everybody who came back. I'm walking through there, taking that in myself. Albert was hitting off a tee.
Yeah.
Everybody else getting autographs from the Hall of Famers from everybody else. And Albert's hitting the ball off the tee by himself.
Yeah. And that's just his work ethic. And look, when you're talking about a franchise player, you want your franchise player to also be your hardest worker. That way you're setting the tone for everybody else. And we had that in Chris Carpenter and Adam and Albert Pujols. From my time here, our best two players on our team were our hardest workers, without a doubt. And so you're sitting there as a young player and you're like, well, I guess I should go hit. You know, like I'm not going to sit in here and play on my phone. Like these guys are out there working, and I need to go. They set that standard.
And a model citizen.
Yeah.
I mean, lead by example guy.
And I think Yadi, a lot of why Yadi is what he is today is because he was right there with Albert every step of the way. I mean, they were buddies from day one. And he saw that. And Yadi gets here. He's one of the first guys here. I don't know if he still is, but I know when I was there, I would bet he is. He's watching film at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He's in there watching film.
It's kind of a running joke in spring training. I won't say the type of car, but when you show up, and we all get there earlier than some of the players, not as early as some of them, but you're there before the sun comes up. And when you roll into the lot, everybody walks in and goes, "Oh yeah, the car is there."
Well,
you can tell.
You're driving that car, Brett?
No, I am not. No, Yadi's car is there, and you know that he's in the building because
you know where that started though. That started with Dave Ricketts. Mike Matheny tells that story. He's like, I would try to beat him in the field, and he said I would get there before it would be dark, and I'd get there and I'd pull in, and my lights would hit, and I'd see these little shoes reflecting. And he's out there walking already. He said he'd been there an hour. And he said, I could never beat him to the field. And Dave Ricketts set that standard for the catchers. If we come here early, we work, we go out in the cage, and you see those catchers go out there before the sun comes up. They're stretching, they're doing their drills, they're doing that. I would guarantee you if you ask Albert or Yadi why that is, I 100% guarantee you he would say because Dave Ricketts did it, and this is when we worked.
And now Scott Terry and Larry State do that model at Fantasy
Yes.
Camp. Yeah.
I just try to keep up with it, Scott Terry.
They're up before the sun rises.
Yep.
What's that mean to you, Kyle, to be involved with stuff still like fantasy camp, like coming here to throw BPs? It's one thing to get to wear the uniform, to be a St. Louis guy, but if these guys didn't do what they do, and they do an unparalleled job in baseball, kudos to them. But what's it mean to you to still get to be involved and put that jersey on now at this point?
Well, I tell people all the time, it's the fact that they want you to come back. I feel like most guys, when they're done, it's like, oh, geez, they want to come back and they want this and they want that. And, the fact that I get texts from Larry or Joe or emails and say, hey, can you be available for this? That they still want you to be a part and involved in it is awesome for us. There's a lot, like with my kids missed out on my whole playing time, so they still get to see that I'm connected and kind of what I got to do, and they get to be involved in some of that, like some of the stuff we get to bring, like opening day, they get to come and be a part of it. And sometimes I wish they wouldn't, and we could go sit out in the bleachers one time and but have the experience that I had growing up. But it's really cool to be thought of as somebody that they still want involved, still want to help represent the organization. And I enjoy that type of stuff. I enjoy, coming back and meeting new people. It's helped our charity for a ton, for just connections and introductions to different, groups of people. And so for me, it's great to still, get to come down, put the uniform on in a way that's, I feel like it's every time I come down, I walk around and the ushers are still, stop me and say hello and, know your name and know your kids' names. And just the whole experience, it makes you feel like, you're still really a part of the family, instead of like, hey, we really cared about you for the 5 years you were here. And then, now we're on to somebody else and we don't really care if you come or go. It's always, I can reach out to Larry. We had a couple weeks ago, I reached out and said, hey, is there a way I can get tickets for tomorrow? We had a special thing come up, and absolutely, we'll take care of it. And it's just really nice to be able to
bleacher tickets.
Yeah.
Could you envision, though, originally that the relationships you've built through some of the alumni programming would have had the impact, no pun intended,
yeah,
on your current situation and what you and Bridget are doing?
I don't think you ever I just think it just naturally, happened. Like, I think you meet people, like-minded people, and you just happen to get put in a way where they get to know you. The hard thing in the networking space, and a lot of the corporate people we've met and things, like everybody's trying to get to you, and that's from the player standpoint, from a business standpoint. And so sometimes when you just come together and you just naturally create those relationships, those are the best ones, right? They're not forced. They're not, they're not on the surface. And so no, it's been, great. And the great thing is, it doesn't benefit me, it benefits a lot of people that we get to help, right. And doesn't benefit the people that, support us on that. They understand what they're doing, but
greater cause.
Yeah.
Right?
But it's been, it's just been awesome to kind of meet people on that level and, have that exposure to people. And then we just happen to have an avenue and platform that, allows us to, I always say in the fundraising side of our foundation, I leverage relationships in a healthy way to make a difference for other people. You don't take advantage of them. You don't, try to over leverage them. You just kind of let them happen, and then produce a good outcome, and those relationships continue to grow. So no, it's been fantastic, and it just keeps you relevant. It keeps you relevant, keeps you involved, and a lot of benefits come with that.
You guys do great work with Brace for Impact, which is what you're talking about, your charity group in Haiti and then in North St. Louis as well. If people want to learn more about that, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't give them the opportunity just to give us a little bit about what you guys do and where they can go for more.
Yeah, so we're community development. We started in Haiti. Actually, Adam Wainwright invited my wife and I on a trip in 2014 to go see some stuff him and Jenny were involved with, and we fell in love when we were down there. We were looking for an opportunity here in St. Louis and just having a hard time finding our fit. And I think the reason was we didn't know who we were and what exactly we were looking for. And we went to Haiti. We found that. We found that local leadership that we get to support. And so we have a very large community development project in Haiti, and that's Adam and Jenny are involved with it. We have another partner that's involved. He's a chaplain for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the three of us just kind of spearheaded. And we have a children's home with 40 kids. We have a school that now has over 400 students, started with like 50. And we have a high school we're building right now, so we're going to expand that number even more. We have a feeding program that we feed the kids every day at school, give them meals on the weekends, because we realized they weren't eating on the weekends, and they come in on Mondays and be really struggling. And so now we've taken care of that. We have a hospital. The kid that grew up in our children's home became a doctor, runs this hospital. We have water and sanitation that Adam and his foundation have done a lot with. We have a vocational school. So we touch about 40,000 people a day in Haiti through that. And then 2 years after Haiti, we came back. My wife and I said, we have to have a St. Louis side to things. And so we've taken the same model, finding local leaders and supporting them and elevating their platform and allow them to do it. And we have a great partner down there in North City that's doing just incredible stuff. And we support them on a housing side where they purchase and renovate a lot of homes in really bad shape and bring them back to their original beauty. Some built, I think our oldest is like 1896. Bring it back, fully restore it. And then place families in it, work with those families to help stabilize them and get them onto a good future. And so it's just been awesome to see. He's taken and expanded that even more. Mercy has a clinic down there now for the first time ever in the city. There's so many services now that are becoming available to people in that community. It's been awesome. So it's been a fun ride. It's been a lot. I mean, it's 90% of what I do. I don't make any money on it. I call myself the chief volunteer, but I get to wake up every day and help direct an organization that, makes a big difference locally and internationally. And it's been really fun to see it grow and see our people that we support, our leadership team, see them grow. It's not us. We're not calling all the shots. We're not telling them what to do. We just, support them and their vision and their knowledge of their community and their people. And it's been a lot of fun.
It's incredible what's happened in 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. When we went down there was the children's home had one level and that was it. And they were like, here's our vision. And we were like, yeah, good luck, and then here we are 8 years later. And it's like, I tell people all the time on our trips when we go down there, I said, it's hard. At first it was a tough sell. We'd sit there at night and say, well, this is what they want to do. And everybody's like, yeah, I mean, I don't even know. And now you go down there and people are like, this is amazing. Like from day one, people are happy and cheery on our trips. I'm like, this is what's going on. This and I noticed that shift was when all of a sudden the school was there, the hospital was there, the children's home had been expanded. Like we had done a lot of that stuff that now it's easy for people to see the vision. But early on, man, all they could see was the problems and the headaches and the money and and it's been
you have the built-in testimonials now.
Yeah, a lot of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun.
It's incredible.
Well, I want to end on this. You actually are a franchise leader in something. It's my favorite Kyle McClellan story. You are the franchise leader in fruit snacks eaten.
Yep. Well, I'm tied.
Well, that's true. You are tied.
Tied for first.
I love
Who's keeping these statistics?
Kyle.
Okay. All right.
That's the only thing I lead the franchise in. There's got to be something more.
We got to get the folks at the museum.
I didn't strike them out.
I think they need a display over there actually about snacks consumed.
Yeah.
But tell us that story. Game 5, 2011 NLDS. Everybody knows Holliday and Carpenter. We know how it ended, but how did you spend that game?
Well, it was the DS, so I was not on the roster. I was dealing with a shoulder injury at the time. And
you threw a little bit that year.
I threw a few. And yeah. So we're on the bench and in the locker room in the food room there they had fruit snacks. And so I went in and got fruit snacks. Well, Adam Wainwright was also nursing Tommy John that year.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were hanging out in the dugout. And so as a good young player and a friend, I got fruit snacks for myself. And I brought Adam some fruit snacks. And when I brought him the fruit snacks, we started winning. So I guess it probably was the first inning. I don't know if that was the game that started it.
We got the run in the first, right?
Yeah. Either way, if it was that game or another game, I don't know. But as soon as we opened the fruit snacks, we started winning. And so Adam was like, these are magic fruit snacks. And so the whole playoffs, anywhere we went, we had to make sure there was fruit snacks. And I ate so many fruit snacks throughout the entire playoffs, and we just kept. Like, I remember bringing them out to Adam, and his eye, like he would roll his eyes and slouch his head, and he'd stick his hand out because he knew we had to do it. And we consumed probably a pallet of fruit snacks during that run.
You should have had it on the World Series ring, the fruit snacks.
No,
right next to the squirrel.
Yeah.
How do we not have a fruit snacks partner here at Busch Stadium? That's a category you need to work on for us.
Yeah. I don't even, and I still like fruit snacks, but
it's because you have two small children in your home.
Yeah.
That is amazing. But it was still eating them.
Adam, somebody asked him about it on was it Cameo or whatever where they do the thing. I think somebody asked him about it. He said, tell us a story about the World Series that nobody would know. And he was like, I'm going to tell you, me and Kyle McClellan ate so many fruit snacks. So he's told that story a few times. So it's kind of nice that I wasn't the only one that remembered it. But that was our contribution, man.
Does that meet the dietary guidelines in the clubhouse now or not?
No.
Not.
Adam doesn't. He's like an empty pit, man.
He can eat whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were on the plane.
He's on the Tom Brady thing now, isn't he?
I don't know.
I thought he had cut up. Yeah, he went through some kind of cleanse or something. I don't know where he's at now.
We were on the plane. We had a guy, the dietary guy came in, and he took over all our stuff in the kitchen, and Adam was like, man, like I just want some of my things, and he wouldn't give them to him. And so then they came, and then they took the stuff on the plane. So like, and he was like, that's where I draw the line. Like, I want my potato chips, and I want my Milky Way, and I want my soda.
He wants his Chick-fil-A
on the plane.
Right.
And so that was like, that's where he drew the line. He was like, you cannot come on my plane and take our stuff that we're eating at 3 o'clock in the morning when we're flying from city to city. And so he went, and then we started to like get some healthy chip alternatives that we could have. But he was like, they drove him nuts.
Well, there's going to be a lot more great stories like this on a new podcast that you're hosting for us. Release date is TBD, but it's called The Chatter's Box. Play on Batter's Box. We think it's a pretty fun name. Just exciting that you're going to be doing that for us. Tell us a little about just some of the things that are floating out there that you're excited to maybe get into in a broad sense.
Yeah, so this is something that I've talked to a couple people about. I've done pregame stuff for KMOX, and I enjoy that. It's good, but over 162 games, you end up saying the same thing. Well, pitchers got to keep the ball down. They need to get ahead. They need to throw strikes. Hitters, we need to score more runs than the other team. Need to play solid defense. I don't know what else there is to say in a pregame.
Lord willing, everything's going to work out.
Right. Yeah. And if you lose, you show up tomorrow and, you just keep going. And so I was telling a couple of the people, like, man, I'd really like to dive a little bit deeper. I did an interview with Adam and Yadi a couple years ago that I tried to get for 3 years in spring training, and I finally got it. And it was incredible. I've never seen those two be interviewed together, and you very rarely see Yadi ever interviewed, especially in English. And so I just thought, I was like, man, this is something I want to get, not only for my own sake, but like, from a historical standpoint, these two need to be interviewed. And so I was explaining that to some of the people here with the Cardinals. Like, there's some things here that I think, especially in today's world, need to be documented and need to be for 200 years from now to be able to, pull these out. And so, the Cardinals said for 2 years I haven't done anything, on the pregame stuff because of COVID. And so they said, hey, we're going to bring it back this year, and it's going to be a podcast. And so I'm excited about it because as a kid growing up here, I want to take a historical look at this, we're going to start off with the current team, because I think that's always important, and kind of we're going to have to drum up some interest and get some following for this. But once we do that, the 82 team, it's their 40-year reunion this year. I wasn't alive in 82. So
you missed a good one.
Yeah. So for me to like go back and do some of the research and find out some of those stories, like I know the 82 team won, and I know some of the guys that were on the team, but I looked up the roster. I was like, wow, there's a lot of guys I didn't know were on the team. There's just a lot about that I want to kind of bring out, and I want to learn a little bit. But I know I'm 37 years old. I know there's a large amount of people out there that are in the same boat I am, and trying to connect those generations of Cardinals fans is really what I'm looking to do. And there's just so much history and stories in the organization that I just want to make sure it gets documented and told. And so we're going to start out small. We're going to start out with just this season and see how it goes. But we have a lot of plans for, other areas and ways we can take it. And Martin Coco, who actually, works for the Cardinals, I was talking to him at an event we had. Him and his wife were there, and we were talking about, I was doing the podcast, and he said, I think this is a great example of kind of the ideal situation. He said, man, I'm a huge Arkansas fan. And to be honest with you, I haven't watched Arkansas, in a while. But I started listening to this podcast, and they started, with talking about the things that really stood out to me and like struck a chord with me. And it took me back to my childhood and when I really grew up, loving Arkansas. And he said, and then they started sprinkling in some of the new stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I find myself watching Arkansas games now, and falling back in love with, Arkansas and the sports side. And so I think that's kind of what I'm shooting for. There's going to be some things we're going to talk about that maybe 20-year-olds aren't going to care about, but it's going to really be something that 60, 70-year-olds are going to be like, oh man, that's my generation of baseball there that we grew up watching, and vice versa. We're going to do some of the current guys, some of the older guys, and
it's a generational sport like no other.
Yeah. Well, and it connects families, right?
Does.
I mean, right. You see so many women that are huge Cardinals fans because their dad took them to Cardinal games. That was their connection growing up, or their mom took them to Cardinal games, or we see that all the time with the alumni stuff and fantasy camp, and exactly. It is what connects so many families, and so there's just so many stories out there, especially of an unbelievable generation that unfortunately is becoming less and less able to reach out to and to connect with. That wasn't documented that well. Like I think about Bob Gibson, and when I see anything about Bob Gibson, I see the same couple highlights, right? I mean, there's so much more to Bob Gibson and what he did. And I just think having this, the ability to sit down and document this for 200 years and for the Cardinal, museum and just whatever, I think would be, I hope that this is beneficial for a lot of people and for a long time. And, that we can get some guys to sit down and really pull some stuff out of them. And it's not going to all be, 100% baseball. Like I want to talk to Albert about his early days in the Dominican and what that is like. I mean, he's one of the most successful Dominican players ever. And I think that means a whole lot to him, and he's so proud of the Dominican and where he comes from and does so much with his charity back there that offer him the opportunity to talk about that. Maybe he doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know, but we'll find out, and if he does, it needs to be told. Because I'll tell you, before I went to rookie ball, I didn't know the first thing about Dominican Republic and that baseball was being played there like it was, and then you realize real quick, like, man, this is a totally different path of baseball for these kids and what they've been going through than what we have. And we're in the same locker room now, trying to achieve the same goal. So there's just a lot of experiences. And I think I bring a unique perspective to it, of to be able to sit down with these guys, even if I didn't play with them, that I went through a lot of the same stuff they went through. And, I think when you're sitting there talking with somebody, I think that comes out. So I'm excited about it. I hope it, goes well and continues, and that we can dive into more and more and more as we go. But it's a big, honestly, when you talk about it, like an official podcast of the St. Louis Cardinals, and then they're like, hey, we're going to give it to you to take it and run with, like, that's a big responsibility. But I'm excited. We got a great cast to help, support it. And I think we can really make it into something that Cardinal fans are crazy, right? They're craving content. And I think this is something that's going to be, something that a lot of people are going to really pay attention to and get involved with.
It's going to be awesome. Again, the name of the show is The Chatters Box. Not an official release date yet, but coming sometime here in 2022. Cardinals.com/podcast is where you can check it out. It'll also be available anywhere that this show is, which is pretty much anywhere that you get your podcast. You hear that phrase a lot. So Joe Pfeiffer, Larry State, Emily Stevens, and Travis Hawkins were on our cameras today on the YouTube version. Kyle, man, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I think there's a lot more we could even dig into. We'll have you back sometime and do it again.
Yep. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Man.
Yep.
Thanks.
That's it for this edition of the Cardinals Insider Podcast. We'll talk to you next month from here at Busch Stadium.